My name is Zara Al-Mansour, and this is the story of how I lost everything before I truly understood what it meant to have anything at all. They say that being born into royalty is a blessing, that golden cradles and silk sheets guarantee happiness, that power protects you from the cruelties of the world. But I learned the hardest truth of all. The highest towers cast the darkest shadows, and sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. I was born on a scorching summer night in Riyadh, in a palace that sprawled across the desert like a monument to excess. My first breath was taken in a room where the walls were adorned with gold leaf, where crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, where the air itself seemed perfumed with wealth. My mother told me later, during one of our last conversations, that my father didn't come to see me for 3 days after I was born. He was disappointed, you see. I was his 7th daughter, and he had been praying for a son. From my earliest memories, I understood that I was both precious and worthless at the same time. Precious because I carried royal blood, because I wore dresses that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime, because servants bowed when I passed. Worthless because I was female, because I couldn't carry on the family name, because in my father's eyes, I was just another beautiful ornament in a palace full of them. My childhood was a strange contradiction of abundance and emptiness, of having everything except the one thing that mattered most: unconditional love. The palace where I grew up was like a golden cage, beautiful and suffocating in equal measure. Marble floors stretched endlessly beneath my feet, so polished I could see my reflection everywhere I walked, as if the palace itself wanted to remind me constantly of who I was supposed to be. There were gardens with fountains that danced to programmed music, rooms I never entered because the palace was simply too vast, garages filled with cars that cost more than hospitals, and yet I remember feeling so profoundly alone that sometimes I would cry myself to sleep despite being surrounded by dozens of staff members. My mother was a kind woman, but she was broken long before I was old enough to understand why. She was my father's 3rd wife, chosen for her beauty and her family connections, and she had committed the unforgivable sin of not producing a male heir. I watched her fade over the years, like a flower deprived of sunlight, her smiles becoming more practiced, her eyes more distant. She would sit for hours in her private quarters, staring out at the desert, and I wonder now if she was imagining escape, or simply remembering a time before the palace walls closed in around her. I had 6 sisters, scattered across different wings of the palace, daughters of different mothers, and we were raised more as competitors than siblings. We were taught to be perfect, to walk with grace, to speak multiple languages, to understand art and music and literature, to be ornaments worthy of our royal status. But we were also taught, in subtle and not so subtle ways, that we were temporary residents in our father's house, that our value would ultimately be determined by the marriages he arranged for us, by how well we could be traded to strengthen alliances and expand influence. My tutors were the best money could buy. I learned English, French, and Arabic with equal fluency. I studied history and discovered that women throughout time had been treated as property, as prizes, as problems to be solved. I read poetry and found words for the emptiness I felt. I learned mathematics and science, and my teachers would praise my quick mind, but always with a tinge of sadness, as if they knew that my intelligence was another beautiful thing that would ultimately be wasted. There was one person in the palace who made me feel seen, truly seen, and her name was Layla. She was my mother's personal attendant, a woman from a small village who had come to work in the palace to send money back to her family. Layla would braid my hair and tell me stories about the world beyond the palace walls, about normal families who laughed together at dinner, about girls who chose their own paths, about love that wasn't negotiated like a business transaction. She would say to me, "Little princess, you have a fire in your eyes that no golden cage can contain. Remember that." I didn't understand what she meant then. I wish I had listened more carefully. When I turned 16, everything changed. My father announced that he had arranged my marriage to Prince Khalid, a man 30 years older than me, a distant cousin known for his vast oil wealth and his collection of young wives. I remember the moment clearly. We were having dinner, one of the rare formal occasions when my father actually acknowledged my existence, and he simply stated it as fact, the way you might comment on the weather. "Zara, you will marry Prince Khalid in 6 months. It's an excellent match. You should be grateful." I felt the room spin. I looked at my mother, hoping for some intervention, some protection, but she kept her eyes on her plate. My sisters sat in silence, some of them relieved it wasn't them, others knowing their turn would come. I opened my mouth to speak, to protest, to say that I was still a child, that I had dreams of going to university, of seeing the world, of choosing my own life. But my father's cold stare silenced me before I could form the words. In that moment, I realized that I had no voice, no choice, no future, except the one being decided for me. The next 6 months were suffocating. I was subjected to endless preparations, fittings for elaborate dresses, lessons on how to please a husband, meetings with Prince Khalid's representatives to discuss the arrangement. I met Khalid himself only twice, both times in highly supervised settings, and each time I felt physically ill. He looked at me the way someone might examine a car they're considering purchasing, assessing, calculating, never once asking me what I thought or felt or wanted. His eyes were cold, his smile mechanical, and I knew with absolute certainty that marrying him would be a kind of death. I tried to talk to my mother, to beg her to intervene, but she would only hold my hands and tell me that this was our duty, our fate, that all women of our class had to make such sacrifices. "I survived it," she would say. But her hollow eyes told a different story. I tried to talk to my father once, to appeal to whatever small affection he might have for me, but he dismissed me with a wave of his hand. "You're being dramatic," he said. "Prince Khalid is wealthy and powerful. You'll want for nothing." He couldn't understand, or didn't care to understand, that I was already wanting for everything that mattered. It was Layla who finally said what no one else would. 3 months before the wedding, she found me crying in the garden, and she sat beside me in the fading light. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I know it seems impossible, but there are ways to leave, to disappear, to start over." I looked at her as if she had suggested I fly to the moon. Where would I go? How would I survive? They would find me and bring me back, and it would be even worse. Layla took my hand. "Maybe. Or maybe you'd finally be free. Sometimes, princess, we have to choose between a comfortable prison and a dangerous freedom." Her words planted a seed that grew into a desperate plan. I began to secretly gather small amounts of cash, jewelry I could sell, documents I might need. I started paying attention to the palace security routines, to the moments when supervision was lax, to the staff who seemed sympathetic. I reached out through encrypted messages to a distant cousin who had scandalized the family by moving to London and building her own life. She agreed to help me, to provide a place to stay initially, though she warned me that if I did this, there would be no going back, that my family would disown me completely. 2 weeks before my wedding, I made my escape. It was during a scheduled shopping trip to a luxury mall, one of the few times I was allowed outside the palace, though always with guards and attendants. I had planned every detail meticulously. In the changing room of a high-end boutique, I changed into simple clothes Layla had secretly provided, covered my face with a plain hijab, and slipped out through a service entrance while my attendants waited outside the door. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I got into a car Layla had arranged, driven by her brother, and we headed toward the airport. Those hours were the longest of my life. Every moment I expected to be caught, dragged back, punished. I had a passport Layla had helped me obtain secretly, a ticket to London purchased under a fake name, and a terror so profound I could barely breathe. At the airport, I was certain the security would recognize me, that alarms would sound, that my father's influence would reach out and snatch me back. But I walked through security, boarded the plane, and as it lifted off from Saudi soil, I experienced something I had never truly felt before. The exhilarating, terrifying sensation of freedom. London was overwhelming. I had traveled before, but always in the protective bubble of wealth and status, always with staff to handle everything, always with the understanding that I was temporary visitor who would return to her golden cage. Now I was alone, truly alone, in a massive city where no one knew me. No one cared about my royal blood, where I was just another face in the crowd. My cousin Nadia met me at the airport, and I'll never forget the way she hugged me, fierce and tight, and whispered, "You're safe now, you did it." But safety was relative. Within days, my family discovered my escape. My phone, which I had stupidly kept, exploded with messages. From my mother, pleading, begging me to come back, saying they would work something out, though we both knew that was a lie. From my sisters, some angry, some envious, some genuinely worried. From my father, threats, cold and precise, informing me that I was no longer his daughter, that I had brought shame upon the family, that I would be cut off from everything, that if I ever tried to return, I would be dealt with severely. The worst message came from Prince Khalid himself. It was short and chilling. "You have made a grave mistake. No one humiliates me and escapes consequences. You may have run, but you cannot hide forever." I deleted my social media, changed my phone number, and tried to become invisible, but the fear never fully left. I would see Saudi men in the street, and my heart would race. I would hear Arabic spoken, and I would panic, wondering if they were looking for me, if my father had sent people to bring me back, or worse. Nadia was incredible, but even she couldn't fully understand what I had lost and what I had gained. She gave me a room in her small apartment, helped me navigate the basics of independent life that I had never learned. How to use public transportation, how to budget money, how to cook basic meals, how to exist without servants and drivers and people managing every aspect of my existence. Simple things that most people learn as teenagers were completely foreign to me. I felt simultaneously liberated and terrified, like I had jumped out of a plane and was free-falling, hoping I would figure out how to fly before I hit the ground. Money became an immediate problem. The jewelry I had brought provided some initial funds, but I had to sell it carefully, secretly, for far less than it was worth. I had been educated but had no work experience, no employment history, no references I could use without revealing my identity. I was qualified for nothing and everything. A princess who didn't know how to do anything practical, whose expensive education seemed useless in the real world. I took a job cleaning offices at night, work I had never imagined myself doing, and I cried the first time I scrubbed a toilet, not because the work was beneath me, but because it was honest work I was doing for myself, and that meant something profound. The emotional aftermath was almost harder than the practical challenges. I had periods of intense regret, moments when I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake, if a comfortable prison might have been better than this constant uncertainty and struggle. I would see happy families and feel a grief so deep it was physical, mourning the family I had lost, the relationships that could never be repaired. My mother eventually stopped trying to contact me, whether because my father forbade it or because she couldn't bear the reminder of her own captivity. I'll never know. But slowly, painfully, I began to build a new life. I enrolled in community college using financial aid, studying business and psychology, learning not just from books but from my own experiences of loss and reinvention. I made friends, real friends, people who liked me for who I was, not for my last name or my family connections. I went on dates, awkward and wonderful, with men who saw me as a person, not a possession. I learned to trust again, though it took time, though I still sometimes wake up in panic, thinking I'm back in the palace, trapped and voiceless. I changed my name legally, became someone new while honoring who I had been. I started a blog, writing anonymously about the experience of leaving everything behind, about the price of freedom, about rebuilding yourself from nothing. The response was overwhelming. Women from all over the world wrote to me, sharing their own stories of escape, of reinvention, of choosing themselves over the expectations of family and culture and tradition. I realized that my story, as specific as it was, touched on something universal: the human need for autonomy, for choice, for the right to determine your own destiny. Years passed, and the sharp edges of trauma began to soften, though they never fully disappeared. I graduated from university, started working for a nonprofit that helps women escape abusive situations, found purpose in turning my pain into something useful. I fell in love with a man who knew my whole story and loved me anyway, who understood that I came with complications and fears, who was patient with my healing process. We built a life together, modest by royal standards but rich in ways that matter: trust, respect, partnership, love freely given and freely received. I still think about my family, even after all these years. I wonder about my mother, if she's still sitting in her quarters staring at the desert, if she thinks about the daughter who escaped. I wonder about my sisters, if any of them have found happiness, if any of them have been brave enough to choose their own paths. I wonder if my father ever regrets his cold indifference, if he ever sees that his obsession with power and legacy cost him the one thing that truly lasts: love. The hardest lesson I've learned is that freedom is not a destination, but a constant choice. Every day, I choose to live authentically, to honor my own voice, to refuse to be diminished or controlled. Some days that choice is easy, joyful, affirming. Other days it's hard, lonely, filled with doubt. But even on the darkest days, I know I made the right decision. I would rather struggle in freedom than suffocate in luxury. I would rather be alone than be a prisoner. I would rather risk everything than risk nothing at all. There are still dangers. I know that my father's reach is long, that some members of my extended family consider my escape a stain on the family honor, that there are those who would prefer I simply disappeared. I've had to take precautions, maintain a level of anonymity, always be aware of my surroundings. The price of my freedom includes a certain amount of constant vigilance, and there are times when I resent that, when I wish I could just be normal, just be safe, just breathe without looking over my shoulder. But I've also found unexpected gifts in this life I've built. I've discovered that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, that I can survive things I thought would destroy me, that I can build something meaningful from the rubble of everything I lost. I've learned that family is not just blood, that you can create your own family from people who choose you and whom you choose in return. I've experienced the profound satisfaction of helping other women escape situations similar to mine, of being the voice I wish I had heard when I was 16 and terrified. The woman I've become is someone my 16-year-old self wouldn't fully recognize. That girl was timid, uncertain, shaped entirely by others' expectations. This woman is scarred but strong, broken but rebuilt, alone but connected to a community of survivors and fighters and women who refuse to be defined by their circumstances. I carry my past with me, not as a burden, but as a testament to what I've overcome, as proof that even the most gilded cage can be escaped, that even the most powerful families cannot own your soul unless you let them. I think about Layla often, my guardian angel in the palace. She risked everything to help me escape, and she paid a price for it. My family discovered her role in my disappearance, and she was dismissed from her position, blacklisted from working in any royal household. But she wrote to me once, after I was established in London, and she said, "Seeing you fly was worth any price. You were always meant to be free." I send her money when I can, though she always protests, and I tell her that she gave me something infinitely more valuable than money. She gave me permission to save myself. The question people always ask is whether I regret it. whether the price of freedom has been too high, whether I would do it all again if I could go back. And my answer is always the same. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Because the alternative wasn't really life. It was a slow death. A gradual erasure of everything that makes us human. I was born a princess, surrounded by gold and power. But those things were chains, not blessings. I was abandoned by my family. But in being abandoned, I was finally able to find myself. I've learned that wealth and status are poor substitutes for dignity and autonomy, that being seen and truly known is worth more than all the gold in all the palaces in the world. I've learned that sometimes the people who should protect us are the ones we need protection from, and that walking away from toxicity, even when it's disguised as family, is not betrayal, but survival. I've learned that you can lose everything and still have something left, that you can be stripped of your identity and still find a way to build a new one. My story doesn't have a neat, happy ending, because life doesn't work that way. I still have nightmares about being dragged back to the palace. I still struggle with trust issues, with fear of abandonment, with the deep wounds that come from being rejected by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. I still have moments when I see women in luxury cars or expensive clothes and feel a complicated mix of relief and loss, grateful for my freedom but mourning the ease and security I gave up to claim it. But I also have moments of pure joy that I never experienced in the palace. The first time I made a decision completely on my own, with no one to answer to, no one to approve or disapprove. The first time someone loved me for who I truly was, not for what I represented or what I could offer them. The first time I helped another woman escape an abusive situation and saw her eyes light up with hope and possibility. These moments don't erase the pain, but they balance it. They make it mean something. They transform suffering into purpose. If I could speak to my 16-year-old self, terrified and trapped in that palace, I would tell her that the fear she feels is proportional to the courage she possesses, that the very fact she's contemplating escape means she has the strength to succeed. I would tell her that the hardest years of her life are coming, but so are the most authentic, the most meaningful, the most genuinely alive. I would tell her that being abandoned by people who never truly saw her is not a tragedy, but a liberation. That real family finds you when you're brave enough to be yourself. And if I could speak to other women in similar situations, trapped by culture or family or tradition or fear, I would tell them this: your life belongs to you, not to your family's honor, not to cultural expectations, not to anyone's version of who you should be. Freedom is terrifying, and it comes with costs. But those costs are the price of becoming real, of becoming whole, of claiming the one life you have and living it on your own terms. The cage may be golden, but it's still a cage, and you were born with wings. I don't know what the future holds. I live with uncertainty now, without the false security of wealth and status. I could be discovered tomorrow, dragged back into a situation I can't escape. My father could decide that the shame I've brought on the family is worth more effort to rectify. The threats could become reality. But I've learned that security is an illusion anyway, that the gilded prison wasn't actually safe, that real safety comes from knowing yourself, trusting yourself, being prepared to fight for yourself. My name is Zara, which means radiance in Arabic, but I am no longer anyone's princess. I belong to myself, answer to myself, live for myself. I was born into gold and power, and I walked away from it all for something infinitely more precious: my own voice, my own choices, my own life. I was abandoned by my family, but in that abandonment, I found myself. And that, I've learned, is the only treasure that truly matters. The only inheritance that can never be taken away. The only legacy worth leaving behind. The courage to be free.